You are live.
All right. Welcome to the 2016 Mid-Florida Pop Warner training session for football officials. We're just going to go over a couple things that everybody needs to know for this year's season. We're going to do an overview real quick on what Pop Warner is so that we're all on the same page. And our goal is to have the conference, the coaches, the commissioners, and the officials all on the same page as one big happy family. Pop Warner is, if you don't know, is the largest and oldest youth football program in the country. We're the only one that emphasizes education to the extent that we have national scholarship banquets every year for those kids that are doing the right thing on the field and in the classroom. And we are the only youth football program that has a true national championship every year at the Disney Wild World of Sports. National Pop Warner is the head of Pop Warner. It is the hub and the top tier of the Pop Warner organization. It's located in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. Under the National Pop Warner section, there is a regional, 8 different regions in the country. We in Mid-Florida are the Southeast region. Every region has their own conferences, and we are the Mid-Florida Conference in the Southeast region. Inside each conference, there are associations, different football leagues. Our associations include Umatilla to Harmony, everything in between. We do have 30 different associations in Mid-Florida Pop Warner, which is part of our conference in the Southeast region. Now, inside the associations, each association has their own board that consists of a minimum of a president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, a football commissioner, a cheer coordinator, and a scholastics coordinator that deals with the scholastic and education portion of that. There is a national rule book that's put out every year. You as an official will get an email before the season starts with the password to that rule book that is located online. When you go online, you'll go to popwarner.com, which is the National Pop Warner site. There'll be a tab at the upper right corner that you see here that says Forms and Admin. When you click on that, then you'll see another tab off to the left-hand side that says Rulebook and Admin Manual. When you click on that, you'll have access to download the 2016 Pop Warner Rulebook. That rulebook is password protected. You will get the password for the 2016 Rulebook emailed to you once you've seen this video. And that once you download it, it will be a PDF format, but you will need that password to open up that document every time you open it up. I suggest that you download it, keep a copy of it on your phone so that you have it accessible whenever you need to. Pop Warner is broken up into age and weight divisions. In Mid-Florida Pop Warner, we have Tiny Mites, Mighty Mites, Junior Pee-wee, Pee-wee, new for this year is Junior Varsity and Varsity. We have elected not to do the varsity level, and we do the unlimited level, which gives each association a little bit more leeway on what kind of kids that they sign up, because there is no weight limits in the unlimited division, and that is the oldest group up to 14 years old. Our Pop Warner rules, with the exception of some of the rules that are in the rule book, when it's not in the Pop Warner National Rule Book, it does default to the National Federation Rule Book, but there are some specific rules that are governed in the Pop Warner Rule Book, so it's good to be familiar with those. Specifically for the 2 lower levels, Tiny Mites and Mighty Mites, and we'll go over those right now. In the Tiny Mite level on defense, no player can line up over the center. Players must be lined up 3 yards off of the center, so if he is lined up directly over the center, it has to be 3 yards back in a linebacker type situation. The defense must have no more than 6 guys on the defensive line and no less than 4 guys on the defensive line of scrimmage. Defensive linemen must be head up with the offensive linemen. They cannot be lined up in the gap. Defensive line must be in a 3 or 4 point stance. So those defensive linemen, there's no more than 6, no less than 4. They must be lined up head up, and they must be down in a 3 or 4 point stance. Defensive linemen have to be 1 yard off the ball in the Tiny Mite division. This is something that we need to pay attention to. Coaches will start to complain if they inch up on the ball, so we need to make sure that prior to the snap, the defensive line is 1 yard off of the line of scrimmage. Linebackers and defensive backs can't inch up like you would see in the higher levels. They must maintain a 3 yard distance from the line of scrimmage, and there is no blitzing. This is very important. Blitzing is defined in the Pop Warner Rule Book as moving toward the line of scrimmage at the snap or crossing the line of scrimmage between the tackles. So that is the definition of blitzing, and there is no blitzing in the Tiny Mite or the Mighty Mite levels. So it's important to remember that. What I'd like to suggest most of the time, and we will send this out to you as an official, a cheat sheet, more or less, of the Tiny Mite and Mighty Mite rules. I suggest you keep that with your gear, put it in your car, and if you are assigned a Tiny Mite and Mighty Mite game, just read over that before you work the game so you can remember these rules, such as the blitzing rule. Stripping, there is no stripping if the official deems that the ball was removed from an offensive player by a defensive player from a deliberate strip of the ball. That ball will be marked dead at that point, and there will be a 5-yard penalty assists. So the defense cannot strip the ball from the offense. The Tiny Mite game is played on an 80-yard field. We are allowing 2 coaches on the field at the beginning of the season. By mid-season, there should be 1 coach on the field. Those coaches need to maintain a 10-yard distance from their deepest player. So if the defensive coach is lined up behind the safety, he needs to be 10 yards behind that safety and make every attempt to stay out of the area of play. Once the ball is set for play, in the Tiny Mite division, the offense has 40 seconds to execute the next play. All 11 players must participate in the huddle. That's not something we as officials need to police, but it is a rule that they can't leave the offensive linemen on the line of scrimmage while they just talk to their skilled players in the huddle. No kickoffs are permitted in the Tiny Mite level. At the start of the game, the ball will be placed on the 35-yard line, and that is the 35-yard line on the 80-yard field. So you're 5 yards away from midfield at the start of the game and after each score. There is no punting permitted. So in a Tiny Mite game, on a 4th down, the team has the ability to either run a play or elect to punt, and in that case, the ball will be moved to the opponent's 35-yard line, and the opponent will get possession of the ball at that point. The rule book says in the Tiny Mites, major penalties are 10-yard penalties. Minor penalties are 5 yards. That's something that will be at the discretion of the white hat during the game. There are no 15-yard penalties in Tiny Mite football, so that's up to your best judgment on what you believe is a major or minor penalty. Again, major penalties 10 yards, minor penalties 5 yards. The time of the game in the Tiny Mite level, it's a 22-minute half with a 10-minute halftime. The game clock will be a running clock and will only stop for timeouts, change of possession, or injuries at the discretion of the official beyond that. We say stop the clock on the Tiny Mites at change of possession, and I will tell you at a reasonable time, if it's taking them too long, they are 6-year-olds, 6 and 7-year-olds, start the clock at a reasonable time so that these games don't get too long. Most associations will allow for a 1 hour time frame for their Tiny Mite game, and if we stopped the clock and left it stopped until change of possession, most of the time those games would run very, very long. So stop the clock on change of possession, restart it at a reasonable time, if not the snap. No score will be kept in the Tiny Mites. There will be no tiebreakers because there is no score. There are no point after attempts, so once a team scores, the opposing team will get the ball at their 35-yard line. The play will be blown dead if there's a fumble. We're talking about fumbles. If there's a fumble behind the line of scrimmage, the play will be blown dead. If the fumble happens beyond the line of scrimmage, then it will be a live ball, with the exception of the strip rule that we just talked about. If the ball is deemed a deliberate strip of the defensive player, the ball will be blown dead, and there will be a 5-yard penalty assessed. Any other fumble happens behind the line of scrimmage, it's a dead ball. Beyond the line of scrimmage, it's a live ball. Let's talk about the offense for a minute for Tiny Mites. The offense must be a balanced 2 tight end formation. They have to have 2 tight ends, and it must be a balanced line. Ends may not be split out, with the exception of 1 receiver that can be out beyond no more than 5 yards beyond the last man, beyond the tight end. All other backs must be between the 2 tight ends in the backfield. Shotgun formations are permitted. However, if the team is in a shotgun formation, then the player receiving the snap must either pass the ball, hand the ball, or pitch the ball. This alleviates one kid taking the snap and run a wildcat situation in a Tiny Mite game that is not that is prohibited. So if they line up in a shotgun situation, kind of remind yourself, the player that receives that snap must pass the ball, pitch the ball, or hand the ball off. Although the game is serious for Tiny Mites, now it's one step up from the Mighty Mites. The next game, it is still an instructional league. They will be allowed to have one coach on the field for the Mighty Mites. And there are some specific rules for Mighty Mites that are not the same as our National Federation rules. Again, there is no blitzing in Tiny Mites. The blitzing is defined the same as it is in Tiny Mites. You cannot move toward the line of scrimmage at the snap, and you cannot cross the line of scrimmage between the tackles. There is no rushing of punts or field goals, point afters. In the Mighty Mite division, the kids can be on the field and they can jump up and down, but they are not allowed to rush in a punting or a point after kick situation. In the Mighty Mite level, there are not allowed to have more than 6 defensive linemen on the line of scrimmage, where Tiny Mites is no less than 4, no more than 6. Mighty Mites, they can have less than 4, but they cannot have no more than 6 defensive linemen on the line of scrimmage. Defensive players on the line of scrimmage must be lined up in either a 3 or 4 point stance and may not line up over the center. If this occurs, you must warn the team. If it occurs again, it'll be a 15-yard penalty if they line up over the center. Now, there is no head-up rule in Mighty Mites like there is Tiny Mites, so players can line up in a gap. They just can't line up head-up over the center, and they must be in a 3 or 4 point stance on defense. Effective this year in 2016, there will be no kickoffs for Tiny Mites, Mighty Mites, or Junior Pee Wee. Each one of those games will start with the ball on the 35-yard line, and after each score, and after the extra point in the Mighty Mite and Junior Pee Wee games, the ball will then restart for the next team on the 35-yard line. Let's talk about sideline personnel real quick. Don't hesitate as an official. Don't hesitate if there's a chain crew member that is trying to be actively participating in the game or maybe talking to the opponent coaches while on the sideline. If that occurs, stop the game, replace that chain crew member right away. We want to nip those types of situations in the bud, so make sure that chain crew is doing exactly what you need them to do and nothing else. If you see them engaging in the game or whatever, just stop the game and get that person replaced. Fighting, intimidation, or disrespect for authority, those are cause for ejection from the game. And I like to say with no exception, we don't like to sit kids who are not being ejected from the game. My suggestion to you, if you have a kid who you think might start to cause a problem in the game, you may go talk to the coach and tell the coach, hey, coach, number 55 needs to be taken out of the game. I would suggest you take him out of the game. But leave that up to the coach. If the coach decides to take him out of the game and does the right thing, great. If not, and that kid just does something that he shouldn't do in the game and ends up getting ejected, that coach and that player learn the lesson. We want to do as much preventive officiating as we can, but we don't necessarily have the authority to sit a kid unless he's being ejected. So let's follow that rule and make sure that, if a kid does something that warrants an ejection, we go ahead and eject them. We report that ejection. The white hat will do that by letting me know that ejection happened. That way we alleviate the confusion. The kid was asked to sit down. Was he ejected? Was he not? Talk to the coach. If you think a kid needs to be brought out of the game to cool off, talk to the coach. Hopefully the coach does the right thing. Otherwise, if something happens that warrants an ejection, go ahead and do the ejection. Minimum player rules. Each team must have 16 players to start a game. They must maintain 15 throughout the game in order to keep playing. So what I suggest is when a team lines up to start the game, either for kickoff or in the lower levels at the 35-yard line, do a quick glance over the sideline and see how many players are on the sideline. You can do the quick math to make sure that they have enough players to start that game. If for some reason in the middle of the game a team falls below 15 players, the game is over and it is a forfeit. Now you may run into a situation where a team has a player who gets shook up a little bit, he gets taken off the field. If he has his mandatory plays in, the coach can make the decision to not put him back in the game, but he is still an eligible player. But if a kid obviously gets hurt, he's taken off an ambulance, and that brings him down to 14 players, the game has to be forfeited at that point. What we like to say for the minimum plays, that's not something the officials need to police, but white hats, if you would, if you're a white hat at the start of the fourth quarter, just kind of ask each coach, do you have your plays in? And give them maybe an extra 30 seconds or so to kind of organize, because the rule says if a player does not have his mandatory plays in, he has to go in the game at the start of the fourth quarter, remain in the game until he has all his plays in. So there may be some disorganization, especially early in the season, with some coaches trying to get those mandatory play situations taken care of at the start of the fourth quarter. Just kind of give them a second do that at the beginning of the fourth quarter and kind of remind them, hey, do you have your players in? And that's the only thing I would ask the police on the mandatory play rule. In Pop Warner, there are no duplicate numbers allowed on the field. However, the National Federation rules as far as numbering goes on jerseys is not followed by Pop Warner. We see this kind of as a problem because that leaves an eligible lineman, let's say a guard or a center, if he is the end man on the line on an unbalanced formation, that player technically would be eligible for a pass if the numbers don't come into play, because in high school football, the number is what makes that player ineligible. So if the numbers aren't being officiated like the National Federation, that kind of leaves that leeway. That's something that we need to address in the future. But this year, if you see that happen, you kind of have to let it go, because technically by rule, that player would be eligible. Most of the time we won't see that. If you do see it, handle that appropriately. But it's not officiated the same way as we do in high school, because in high school the number makes the player ineligible. So hopefully we don't see that too much, but if you do, just kind of understand that the number that would make that player ineligible doesn't apply to Pop Warner. Mouth guards, even though the high school rules have changed, clear and white mouth guards are still prohibited in Pop Warner football, and the mouthpieces have to be attached to the face mask. This is so that we can quickly glance and see that every player has their mouthpiece in as a safety precaution. What I would suggest is please be very critical of this early in the season, so that we make sure that every player has their mouthpiece in. If there's a player that comes on the field that does not have a mouthpiece or has a mouthpiece that's not attached to his face mask, please remove him from the field until that's remedied. Let's be very strict about that early in the season, so we don't have to worry about that week 4 and 5. Scoring values in Pop Warner, everything's the same except for the point after kicks. Obviously, if in Pop Warner, most of us know that if you kick an extra point and it's good, it's worth 2 points instead of 1 point, that it would be in high school football. Other additional sideline personnel things, each Pop Warner team has about 10 coaches on their coaching staff by rule. All of those coaches are required to have a badge around their neck. This is not something that we expect the officials to police. However, if there is a coach that's on the sideline who is giving you a hard time or has a lot to say about the game, it is a really quick tool that we can use by looking at that coach and say, hey coach, where's your badge? If he doesn't have a badge, he needs to be off the sideline. So don't expect you to police that, but you can use that as a tool if there's a coach that shouldn't be there or is trying to get too involved in your job as an official. There are no radio communications devices allowed on the sideline in Pop Warner, so if you see coaches out there with headsets or they're using their phone, we need to make sure that we tell them not to do that. All right, lopsided score rule. Rule states, if a team goes up by 28 points or more, the following will occur. The clock will become a running clock, and it will only be stopped for injuries or at the discretion of the referee. So if there's a timeout, clock still runs. On a score, clock still runs. Change of possessions, clock still runs, and it will remain a running clock for the remainder of the game. Once a 28-point differential is obtained between two opponents, the winning team cannot pass the ball, run sweeps outside the tackle. If the winning team fails to abide by this rule, each violation will be a loss of down, which is something that we forget. It's a loss of down and a 5-yard penalty if they pass the ball or run the ball outside on a sweep. This is a judgment, so if it happens at the line of scrimmage where a kid bounces it out, if you deem that to be outside, the suggestion that is made by one of the officials, a brilliant thing, is when you get in this situation, have the white hat line up on the outside of the end man on one side, the umpire line up on the outside, the end man on the other side, and that way you can tell whether that person's bouncing outside during the play. Also, on a lopsided score, there will be no blitzing by either team. Obviously, the team is required to run between the tackles, can't run to the outside, so it is illegal for either team to blitz. The clock becomes a running clock. A lopsided score is in effect. There is no blitzing. There will be no onside kicks by either team. The winning defense cannot advance a fumble or a pass interception. The ball is blown dead, but they may take possession of the ball at that point. The losing team cannot place more than 7 players inside the box down on the line of scrimmage, obviously because the winning team has to run between the tackles. So we got to watch the losing team, make sure their defense is not lined up with more than 7 guys in the box and make that an unsafe area. If at any point during the game, the remainder of the game, the point differential drops below the 28 points, the clock will continue to run, but regular gameplay will resume. So If it's 28-0, the losing team scores, everything goes back. They can pass, they can possess, they can advance interception. They don't have to run between the tackles, all those things, but the clock will continue to run. In the Mighty Mite division, all games will stand as ties. We cannot break ties in the lower levels, junior, peewee, and above. In the upper levels, we will break ties just like we do in high school under the same rules. Mighty Mite, Tiny Mites, there are no tiebreakers. Let's talk about the commissioner for a minute. The commissioner is the person that you will have the point of contact with as an official on the field. Each association has a commissioner. He's in charge of their football program, and he will be in charge of the site for administrative purposes. If you have a problem during a game where maybe a chain crew person won't leave that you want leave, stop the game, ask for the commissioner, let the commissioner take care of those problems. But once the game starts, once we have the coin toss, the referee at that point will be in charge of the field and the gameplay, and the commissioner will not have any bearing on the game at all. They've been told this, they understand what their role is, and we shouldn't have any problems with that. We will be having the referee, where in the past the commissioners have done the pregame with the coaches. The referee is going to do that now at the coin toss. We will email out to all of the officials what the pregame should state. Very similar to what we do in high school football, we'll be asking both coaches, are your players legally and properly equipped? And remind them that they are in charge of their assistant coaches, their players, and their fans at all times. And that we expect sportsmanship and discuss those things at the coin toss. That's going to come from the referee now instead of the commissioner, so that everybody understands that the referee is in charge of the game. We will be sending out an inclement weather protocol for this season, so that everybody knows exactly what to happen if there is a delay in the game. So watch that for your emails. It will outline exactly what's to happen if a game does get delayed and when games should be canceled, so that every field's going to be using it at the same way, and that we're all on the same page. It also will discuss at what point does the official get paid for that game and how we're going to handle makeup. So watch for that in your emails. The inclement weather protocol will be coming out to every official prior to the season starting this week. Pay increase for this season. We are paying $45 for officials on the field, $35 for the clock. It's gone up $5 in both cases, and probably will go up again in the next 2 years, $5 more. We want to make sure that we have all the good officials that are in this area working Pop Warner games, so that we don't have to compete with the other youth football programs in the area for officials. Let's talk about professionalism for a second. We expect every official to be professional. We expect you to approach every Pop Warner game like you would approach a Friday night game. Although we're not going to get the same professionalism sometimes from the coaches because we're dealing with volunteers, we do expect the officials to handle everything as professionally as they would on a Friday night, and just understand that sometimes we have to help the coaches in Pop Warner, learn how to be professional as coaches. And we talk about this all the time. It is an emotional game. It's going to be for the coaches. It's going to be for the players. It's not going to be for us. So we need to maintain our composure, maintain our professionalism at every level of Pop Warner football, and that's what we expect from our officials on the field. Everybody's done a pretty good job. That professionalism starts with the way that you show up at the field. We expect everybody to show up at the field with collared shirt on and shorts with belt loops and belts. Black shoes. I think if everybody shows up looking professional, it'll set the tone for the day, and everybody will know that you're there and you mean business, and you're going to be there as a professional official for the remainder of the day. The arbiter, real quick, if you're not on the arbiter, send me an email, brettjdunn@yahoo.com. Make sure that you're ready to be assigned. Have your personal information in there. Your address is very important on the arbiter because everything is assigned by location so that we can keep people's travel down to a minimum. If you have a photo, please put a photo in there on arbiter. It just kind of helps us remind everybody who we are, who each person is. Check it frequently. You'll get an email with an assignment. Please go on as soon as possible and accept or decline those games once they are assigned to you through the email. Our 2-week goal. We have a 2-week goal. We try to get the games assigned 2 weeks in advance, so everybody has advance notice. Sometimes that's difficult because we have makeup games that will happen, and it'll keep things from being scheduled for the next 2 weeks if we're trying to do makeup games. Hopefully we won't have too many problems with that this season, but our goal is always going to be 2 weeks. Look for those games 2 weeks in advance if at all possible. This is just a kind of an example of a schedule. We're trying not to have people work 6 games. There are some guys who are extremely athletic and in shape that can handle 6 games on the field. Most of the officials probably should, work 3-game minimum. If you are working 6 games, generally you're not going to be the same official on game 6 as you are on game 1. So we want to keep as fresh feet on the field as we can. And so we're trying to kind of cut down the 6 games. There will be people that will be assigned for 6 games. But we're trying to keep that down to a minimum. If for some reason during the season you're getting assigned 6 games and it's hard for you to do that, please let me know. If for some reason you think you are equipped to work 6 games and you're only being assigned 3, let me know and I'll put you on the list of guys that can do 6 games. There are going to be weeks, no matter what, where guys will be assigned 6 games and we'll need that extra body because people will put blocks on, people go on vacation. Things happen where not everybody's available each week. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me. You can text me, you can email me, you can and call me on the phone. My phone number is here. My email address, brett@midflorida.org, will come straight to me, or you can email me at brettjdunn@yahoo.com. Let's have a good season. We're expecting great things from everybody. I think all of our coaches and our officials will be on the same page a little bit more this year, even more than we were last year. If you have any problems or any issues at all, get a hold of me and let me know. If for some reason you're not being scheduled, if you go 2 weeks without a schedule, that's not on purpose unless you and I have had a conversation. So if you think that your schedule's not where it should be, call me. Let's talk about it. We'll work it out. If there are any issues or anything with either the people that you work with or the fields that you're being assigned, please let me know. Let's talk about it throughout the season. We'll get it worked out. I appreciate you watching the video, and I look forward to a great season. Thank you.
Sorry.
You're good.
All right.
Sweet.